Hey guys, how is everybody doing? And welcome to the near finale of my 2024 end of the year rankings. And now that I have talked about the most disappointing and most surprising movies of 2024, now it is time to talk about the worst films of 2024. Now, when I say the worst films of 2024, these are movies that I think are bad films. These are movies throughout the calendar year I thought were some of the worst made movies, some of the worst just movies in general. Some of these movies I have already talked about on my channel with these end of the year rankings, so you're going to be hearing me kind of repeat what I've said before. But yeah, this is a list that I don't really like doing, if I'm being honest, because I hate being a negative person when it comes to films. Because the reason I created this channel is because I love films, I love movies, I love watching them, I love talking about them. Like, eh, I just love movies in general, but it really pains me when I go into movies and I watch it and I say that is generally one of the worst movies I've ever seen, or one of the worst movies of the year, because it's something I don't like doing, but I feel it's only fair. I talk about most disappointing, surprising, I talk about the best. It's only fair that I talk about some of the worst films of the year. So if you don't like hearing me talk negatively, if you don't like me ranting or anything like that, then this video is obviously not going to be for you. But if that is your cup of tea with my channel, then you're going to be getting 30 minutes of happiness. So yeah, with that all out of the way, here are the top 10 worst movies of 2024 in my opinion. I'm coming in at number 10. Now, when I was making my list, there were some movies on here I felt did deserve to be on this list, but some of these movies on this list I can't see myself rewatching and being like, okay, it's decent, it's not terrible, but it's still not very good. But there's maybe like three or four movies on this list that I don't consider some of the worst films I've ever seen, but these are movies that I do feel deserve to be on the list. And number 10 is going to be The Strangers Chapter 1. Now, I really enjoy that original Strangers movie. I think that is a very good concept. I really like the idea of it, but the characters in those movies are very dumb. They make some of the dumbest decisions in horror movie history, in my opinion. But I do really enjoy that first movie. And the sequel, Prey at Night, I think it's fine. I don't think it's great by any means, but it's a fun 80s throwback slasher movie, what it tries to be instead of a home invasion movie, what the original movie was. And when they announced that they were going to do another Strangers movie, I was like, okay, interesting. I wonder if it's going to follow up with Prey at Night. But then they revealed that they had a whole brand new trilogy planned out, and they were all going to be filmed back to back, and they were going to be released, would assume to be in one calendar year, and or possibly one at the beginning of this year. We didn't really know. But then we got the release date for The Strangers Chapter 1, and we still have not gotten the release dates for the other two chapters, which we'll see how that goes. But I did not watch a trailer for these movies. I did not watch a trailer for this film because I wanted to go in blind. I wanted to see if they would give me something new, or if there was just something, or is this just a basic setup for a chapter one sequel to, not sequel, chapter one setup to presumably to be a trilogy. And unfortunately, this is nothing new. This is a shot for shot remake of the original movie. Well, I can't say shot for shot, but it's beat for beat the same thing as the original. You just get a carbon copy of it. So, excuse me. And how am I supposed to be invested in a trilogy of The Strangers if your first introduction into this trilogy is just a carbon copy of the original movie? Like, you literally can predict everything that's going to happen with this movie. You remember the guy accidentally shooting his friend in the face with the shotgun in the house? That happens in this movie, too. Do you remember when the strangers kind of show up and kind of mess with them, knock on the door saying, "Where's Tara?" They do that in this one too. Everything that happens in the original, it just happens again here. And what I loved about that original Strangers movie was the jump scares and how freaky that movie was. Like, you could watch that movie and you will generally be freaked out. It is one of the most unnerving horror movies you can watch for a home invasion movie, to where it doesn't do its cheap jump scares. Sure, it has a few of them, but it legitimately has some of the greatest scares I have seen in a horror movie. But my God, does this movie just have the most generic and most boring and most predictable jump scares. There's literally one part, I was sitting in the theater, I was watching it, the girl drops her phone that has the flashlight, and I knew the second she was going to pick it up, one of them was going to be standing there. And what happened? One of them was standing there. It's a predictable shot for shot remake of a decent horror film at best and still has some of the dumbest characters. There's literally a part to where I seriously almost stood out of my seat and said, "What are you doing?" The character literally has a shotgun pointed at the killer's head, the back of her head, and he's taunting her, talking to her like, "Why are you doing this to us?" And she's not answering. She's laughing, she's giggling, and she's laughing, and she's laughing and yelling at him. And what does he do? He just stands there with the fucking loaded shotgun in his hands, just pointing it at her and doesn't pull the trigger. And this is supposed to be a setup to a trilogy. And if you can't sell me on the first movie when I already have a lot of issues with it and it already has a lot of red flags, then I'm not going to be very interested in your other two movies. And I won't be surprised if those other two movies go direct to streaming because they're going to see the criticisms on it. And if you can't sell us on a chapter one, I guarantee you're not going to be able to sell us on a chapter two or three. And unfortunately, what really let me down was that Rennie Harlan directs these movies. I love Rennie Harlan. He's directed Nightmare on Elm Street 4 and Long Kiss Goodnight. Those are two really good movies that I really enjoy. I've always enjoyed that guy's work, but it just doesn't feel like a Rennie Harlan movie. But I don't know. We'll see what these other two chapters have to offer, but the first chapter was just a shot for shot remake of the original movie and just very predictable and a very frustrating horror film. Coming in at number 9, and again, like I said for 10, it's not one of the worst movies I've ever seen, but it still definitely deserves to be on the list, and that is Joker Folie Ado. Now, I have talked about this movie twice now on my channel with these end of the year rankings, so I'm going to keep it short here. But yeah, Joker Folie Ado, it is one of the bigger disappointments of the year because I really enjoy that first Joker movie. I think that is a very well made movie. Not a great comic book movie by all means, but it still is very entertaining. But unfortunately, this was just a huge letdown. It's just not at all what I was expecting. Musical parts of the movie, which, yeah, they advertise as that, I still didn't care for it. Lady Gaga, unfortunately, was a huge letdown for me in this movie. I was hoping she would come out and surprise me, but it's barely Lady Gaga, and when she sings, it's just like she's muttering the whole time. And then when she actually puts on the Harley Quinn makeup at the end of the movie, there's literally no difference there. You don't really sense that she's becoming a new person or a new personality. Now, it's a very well made movie, directing wise, acting wise, cinematography wise, and all that. Like as a film and as watching it as a film, it is very well made, and it would probably like if I were to do a list of top 10 best made movies of the year, this would probably be in like a top three, maybe. But it's a disappointing sequel that it just has so many issues, and it just didn't need to exist. And at the very end of the day, it's just a very disappointing comic book movie and a very disappointing way to go out. And now that we look back and see it, it should have just never been made. But yeah, now with all the rumors coming out saying that Todd Phillips was pretty much just saying, fuck you to comic book movies, comic book fans, fuck you to Warner Brothers and all that. It's like, cool, but that's not the movie I wanted to see. Coming in at number 8 is going to be the blender of worst Blumhouse movies of the year. So the first one I'm going to be talking about is Night Swim. This was actually the first movie of 2024 and the first horror movie of 2024. Now, if I'm being honest, the only reason I went to go check out this movie is because, like I said, it was the first movie of 2024. I wanted to see what the new year could offer. I was wondering because first impressions mean a lot to me. God, excuse me, heartburn. And I was just more curious. I went with a group of friends. We all wanted to go see it. A buddy of mine who's a big movie fan, like I am, wanted to go see it because, again, first movie of the year. And I thought it was going to be a rough year for movies and a rough year for horror movies, especially because started off with this. Now, let's be honest. January is known as dump month for Hollywood, to where that's where they kind of release some of their worst movies or movies I don't really have a lot of faith in during the month of January. And this was the first one, and kept the trend going because unfortunately we didn't really get any good movies in January. Well, The Beekeeper came out. So what this movie is, and I really wish this was like a scary movie parody in the scary movie series because like this would work perfectly as like a joke or like a parody because what you get is a haunted swimming pool. You get Wyatt Russell, I believe, the son of Kurt Russell. He's kind of the main character. He's a former baseball player, but he kind of got hurt. He got hurt or something like that. And his family buys this house, and they find out kind of like a history with it. It's supposedly haunted or whatever. But like the entire time it's kind of hard for you to keep a straight face because when you're watching it, you kind of think to yourself like, why isn't this like a parody? Why isn't this like a joke? Because then you find out that this was a short film made a few years ago, which of course Blumhouse saw and was like, hey, we'll give you like the smallest budget known to man, and we'll let you release this so the public can see it, and we can try and make a profit off of it. So yeah, just the kind of the main thing when it comes to Night Swim is that it's just your generic Blumhouse movie. Just to they give you a cheap budget and they release it and they know they're gonna make a profit off of it, but just the entire time you're watching it, it's just like, why isn't this a joke? This does not seem like a real film. This does not seem like a film that should be taken seriously, and it is 90 minutes long, and it has some of the most generic jump scares. It doesn't really have the best characters in the world, but it's just like, why don't you just make it a parody? Like, I think a lot of people would have loved it, and I honestly do want to watch the short film on this because, like, knowing it's a short makes a lot more sense. So I would like to watch a short on it, but yeah, the fact of a haunted swimming pool. What's next? A chair? Well, actually, they did that. Coming in at number seven is the next Blumhouse horror movie of the year, and the other worst Blumhouse horror movie of the year, Imaginary. Now, this was a movie that, again, morbid curiosity kind of got the best of me. I was with a buddy of mine. We both wanted to do something. We were both free. We didn't really know what to do. We saw this movie was planned, and we were like, you know what? Let's give it a gamble. And this movie made Night Swim look like a fucking masterpiece because it's another wasted potential for Blumhouse. Kind of like Night Swim. I kind of forgot to mention there's potential there for it to be its next big franchise, but they just don't capitalize on it. So what Imaginary is a very wasted concept to where you get pretty much imagination land and imaginary friend where you get this writer or this artist, excuse me, you get this artist who is the stepmother of this little girl, and they buy this house, reoccurring thing here with Blumhouse right now, and they buy this house and the little girl finds this bear named Chauncey. They kind of become friends, and throughout the movie, like weird things happening and imagination stuff, kind of. And throughout the movie, she kind of does these tasks so she can open the door to imagination land or whatever. And again, it's a wasted potential for Blumhouse for it to be its next big franchise because there's a lot here and a lot of potential. Excuse me, and a lot of potential for it to be its next big franchise, but unfortunately, they just don't capitalize on it. And like Night Swim, the jump scares are very generic. The characters are terrible, in my opinion. The writing, which, oh my god, like, there's one character, this old lady, who supposedly knows stuff about Imagination Land, because you always get that one crazy old person that actually knows something about this for some reason. She, like, gets introduced, like, her lines and her dialogue, it's just terrible, and it's just like, again, why don't you just make this a parody movie? And like, and when you think they're gonna go somewhere, and like they literally have her portray these characters, and like 2 seconds after she betrays them, she like dies from the big giant bear thing. Like again, it's not a very good movie. Blumhouse had a terrible year. I didn't even bother to watch that AI movie they came out with. I think it was called Afraid. Like I didn't bother to watch it because they came out with these two movies. So yeah, Night Swim, excuse me, Imaginary, kind of like Night Swim. It's just a generic, boring PG-13 horror movies with generic jump scares and just a wasted potential for it to be Blumhouse's big franchise. But I will give credit where credit's due with Blumhouse. They will give you a cheap budget and they will make a profit out of it. No matter if the movie is good or bad, they will make a profit out of it. They will give you they've like their highest budget they have ever given a movie is Halloween Ends with $40 million, and that's still not a lot of money to make a movie nowadays. So they've only given these two movies, I think, like it was like a combined like 13 or $14 million combined budgets. So yeah, I will give credit where credit's due that they will always make a profit no matter what, but can you at least make the profit watchable? Coming in at number six, if anything, it's not a bad movie. If anything, it's more of a disappointing film for me, and that is the remake of The Crow. Now, again, I don't think it's terrible by all means, but it definitely deserves to be on this list, and if anything, it's just one of the bigger disappointments of the movie. I already talked about him disappointing in comic book rankings this year. So, why I'm bummed about this movie and why I feel it deserves to be on this list is because looking at it as a remake to that original movie, I think it's terrible. It is a terrible way to try and honor Brandon Lee's legacy, rest in peace, and it's just a terrible way to try and readaptation that film or try to do a reimagining of it. I just don't think they do a very good job. The Shelley and Eric relationship, the chemistry between Bill Skarsgård and the girl that plays Shelly in this one, I feel they don't really have any chemistry whatsoever. There's moments to where it's there, but like they just completely rush it to where it's just like kind of hard to buy into it because they literally meet at a rehab center. They have like one or two conversations and they escape together, and then like literally after they escape, they end up fucking. Like, it's kinda hard for me to buy a relationship if you only had, like, 2 conversations, escape a rehab center, and then you just end up having sex in, like, a random fucking building. But yeah, like that part of the movie, it's hard to buy into. Like I can't buy into that. I can't buy in a relationship. I just like, no, that's not how that works. And then when you actually get to the crow stuff, it takes forever to get to that point. Like Bill Skarsgård, he literally comes back to life and like he kills the guy and he like dies again, but he doesn't know it and he's still confused. He's trying to find out who killed Shelley and he literally doesn't put the makeup on until there's like 20 minutes remaining of the movie. Like that's when he finally decides to put the makeup on. And if the whole movie was like that whole opera sequence, I honestly feel we would not be having this conversation of one of the worst films of the year, worst one of the worst comic book movies of the year, or just like one of the worst remakes of all time, in my opinion. Like I genuinely believe if this movie was like that whole opera sequence, we would not be having this conversation. And out of like a nearly 2 hour long movie, there's only one good action sequence. That tells you how boring this movie is. Well, not boring, it's just how uninteresting it is, really. But yeah, Bill Skarsgård, I won't rip him apart too much. He does fine for what he's given, but it's just a huge disappointment. And looking at it as a comic book adaptation to the comic book, it's fine, but it still doesn't follow it closely. It doesn't even feel like they acknowledge that this is a comic book movie. They more acknowledge that original movie and try to remake that. But yeah, again, it's not one of the worst films I have ever seen. It really isn't one of the worst movies I've seen this year. But I felt it deserved to be on this list. Is just how poorly they did to try to remake the original movie. Coming in at number 5 now, I kind of debated kind of putting this one up higher of how much I didn't really enjoy this movie that much. But this is going to be the first Sony movie you see on this list, and that is Craven the Hunter. Now, this was not a movie I really had any faith in, and I don't really know why I decided to have a little bit of hope with it after all the reshoots, which should have been a huge red flag for me. But, however, they delayed this movie by a full year because they decided to do reshoots. They decided to release it in December instead of October of this year instead of last year, excuse me. And I saw the all the negativity Madam Web got, and I thought they would learn their lesson, but they didn't. They arguably probably made something worse, which I don't know how you do when you have something like Madam Web. So, Craven the Hunter. Craven is one of my favorite Spider-Man villains, and that's kind of the one of the reasons why I went to go watch this movie because I was hoping they would at least do the character justice, which they do fine at this point. I really don't care. They did fine, but like Madam Web, it just has a lot of writing issues, and it has a lot of those issues to where it's just like, why? Aaron Taylor Johnson, he's fine for what he's given. I don't know why he did agree to be in this movie, but redeemed himself when he was in Nosferatu. So, I hate being so negative, especially for comic book movies. I love comic book movies so much. So, Craven the Hunter, it's just one of those laughably bad comic book movies because you literally get a scene with the guy that plays the Rhino, and it is one of the most random fucking scenes I have ever seen in my life. He's literally sitting at a table like this. This guy that works for him, kind of like a henchman for him, he comes in, he goes, "Sir, Craven is here. He's here to kill you," or whatever. And he just sit there, he goes, and it's like, what was that? My first thought was like, oh, maybe the serum from the rhino stuff is messing with him and messing with his brain. They don't talk about it. It never happens again. And then you find out he doesn't even have the fucking rhino serum in him until like 45 minutes later. It makes no sense. And then the final battle between him and fucking Craven, which was like, oh God, we owe the Rhino in TASM 2 an apology because holy shit, is his design decent? Sure, but he's stupid to look at and he's stupid to watch. And I really hope this is the final Sony Spider-Man universe spinoff, whatever, because like after this movie, I just hope they bury it. I hope they never go near something like this ever again. I hope if they do go back to it, they learn their fucking lesson from it. The guy that seems to be in charge of all this left Sony, so there's a good sign, I guess. But whatever. It's another generic comic book movie by Sony that we had to watch three of them this year. Goody. Number four. Now this is the movie that I went, wow, that is arguably one of the worst films I have ever seen in my life, and that is Dear Santa. Dear Santa. This was a movie I had was not really excited for. The only reason I decided to watch Dear Santa was the people that made Dumb and Dumber, Me, Myself, and Irene, and There's Something About Mary, the Fairley Brothers, made Dear Santa. That was the only reason I was interested in it. The concept sounded like it could be fun, but it was a direct-to-streaming movie for Paramount. That gave me a huge red flag. The little snippets of the trailer that I saw looked like it was terribly made and all that. The budget looked bad, but I was like, you know what? It's made by the Fairley Brothers. Maybe I'll have a decent time. But nope. This is hard to watch, and it's hard to remember the people that made Dumb and Dumber made this movie. Because what this movie is, and this sounds like a fun concept, is that you get this kid. It's a Christmas time, obviously, and of course you have to have that direct to streaming Christmas movie every year that is just not very good. And he writes a letter to Santa, but misspells Santa and spells Satan. How do you spell Satan over Santa? I don't know. He accidentally spells Dear Satan, and then Satan shows up and he says, I will grant you three wishes, but then I have to take your soul. Which, it sounds a lot like Bedazzled with Brendan Fraser, which is a remake of a 70s movie I've never saw the original of. Which, it's the same concept. But it's with Jack Black in a shitty looking costume. And my God, it takes a lot for me to hate Jack Black. I hated Jack Black in this movie, and that breaks my heart to say that because I love Jack Black. And again, it takes me a lot to hate someone, and it takes me a lot to hate an actor that I love. But in this movie, it just doesn't seem like he cares, and it doesn't even look like the Fairley Brothers knew what to do with him. It's just like, yeah, here's your lines, and do your Jack Black thing, make everything sound cool, dude. Like, do your voice, do your body language stuff, do some cool dances, do the silly little cool guy voice that you do. That's all he does in this movie, and it's annoying, and it just does not fucking fit the film. It's just like I kind of regret watching it because I saw the trailer and I was like, wow, I know what this movie's gonna be. But hey, Fairley Brothers, right? Nope. Mm-mm. And I actually kind of think I remember when they announced this movie too, and I think I got excited because of the guys that made Dumb and Dumber were making this movie. But again, and then it comes to the kids, which again, I don't like ragging on kid actors because again, they're young. I won't rag on them too much about it, but the kid acting in this movie is terrible. Which again, I won't rag on them at all for it because again, they're kids. But it's just like, dude, could you have got someone else? Could you have tried maybe? Could you have at least not sound so fucking shitty? And then this movie takes like a huge dark turn at the end. I won't spoil it where it goes, but it kind of tries to do this dead brother subplot at the end of the movie, which is like, nope, you have completely changed tones on me. I already lost interest in the movie. You cannot gain interest in me right now when I'm already bored out of my mind and want to turn off the movie. So yeah, the fact that they tried to do that at the end, it's just like, yeah, I've completely given up. And I'm sick and tired every year when a direct to streaming Christmas movie comes to streaming Paramount Prime Video or whatever. Like when it comes to direct to streaming around the holidays, I just know it's going to be bad because we get one every year and we got one with Ben Stiller on Hulu. And after I watched this one and I heard nothing good about that one, I didn't bother to watch it. So yeah, Dear Santa, it is, I would say it's a disappointment, but it's really not. If anything, it's disappointing because the Farrelly brothers made it, and this is one of the worst films I've ever seen these two guys make. Coming in at number three is Tarot. Now, this is a movie that you can pretty much take all of my thoughts that I had on Night Swim and Imaginary, and you can kind of put them in this thing because it's the same scenario. It's a bland PG-13 horror movie that has cheap jump scares and has a wasted concept. Because what you get from this movie is pretty much the Bye Bye Man. Yeah, remember that movie? Yeah, I try to forget that movie out of my brain too. So what it is that you have these kids and they have these tarot cards, and then when they flip them over, you get and they kind of get cursed or whatever. I can't really remember. It's been since May since I watched this movie. I don't really remember what really happens, but like again, what I said about Night Swim and Imaginary, you can pretty much just say it right here because it's just a worser version of those two movies because the designs of these creatures or these things, these demons or whatever you want to call them. I mean, they have potential to look cool, but they just kind of look stupid to look at because it's just like, okay, sure, that's creepy enough. And of course, with every bland PG-13 jump scare horror movie that it's just thrown out into theaters, this movie has no blood, and when it does, it's splattered on the wall. They have off-screen kills. You have characters again that I just don't care for, and that are just bland and just like the TikTok era of horror movie characters at this point. But all tarot really is that you can just take this is all Tarot is. Tarot is a movie that you would probably go to see and watch with your friends in high school. If you're in high school, you would probably go to this movie just to laugh and make fun of it with your friends. Or if you want to go on a date with your girlfriend for this movie and go watch it with them or whatever, and they've never seen a horror movie, and this is kind of like an introduction to them. This kind of it just seems Tarot is just the type of movie you would take your girlfriend to watch on a Friday night because you're in high school or you're in middle school and you just want to go watch a horror movie with her, or you're a person that just wants to get introduced to horror and this is the only one you're able to see because you're so young. Which, if this was your introduction to horror, I bid you luck because you're probably going to have shitty takes in horror movies after seeing this. So, yeah, that's all Tarot is. It's for teenagers, it's for kids in middle school and high school to go watch with their friends or with their girlfriends. That's all this movie is. But as a horror fan, it's just like, oof, and especially the time this came out, I kind of lost faith in horror movies this year, but then it turned out to be one of the better years. So yeah, Tarot, bland PG-13 horror movie, and there's three of them on here now. Coming in at number two is going to be Borderlands. Yay! Let's talk about this movie again. So Borderlands is a movie that I never really looked forward to. I had played some of the first game, but like when I was playing it, I'm like, there's no story here. Borderlands 1 doesn't have a story. I have not played the other ones, but what I got from that first one, I'm like the first game, excuse me, I was like, there's no story here. What about this game merits a nearly 2 hour video game adaptation, which I didn't get, but maybe there could have been some fun with it. They could have done something with it. Like, there was probably something, right? Nope. And I knew it too because the trailers looked terrible. But again, a thing was like my friend and I wanted to go do something. This movie came out. We were like, you know what? Let's go watch it. Let's go have fun making fun of the movie. And we did because the movie sucked. So, where it's really disappointing is the cast. The cast was very stacked. I really enjoyed everyone that was in. I really loved that everyone's name that was attached. You had Kevin Hart, you had Jamie Lee Curtis, and you had Jack Black as the voice of Claptrap. Claptrap in that first game, he was a lot of fun. He was just a lot of fun to interact with. He was funny every now and then. And you get one of the best voice actors in the world, in my mind, to do it. Hell yeah, that sounds great, right? Nope. Like Dear Santa, takes me a lot to do this, but I hated Jack Black in this movie. He was annoying, and it just felt like he tried to do his Jack Black thing again, which it just did not work. And Jack Black had a terrible 2024 in my mind. Kung Fu Panda 4 was decent, but Dear Santa and this now, it's just like, dude, come on, get a better agent right now. Holy shit, you chose terrible movies in 2024. But and the cast again, who I love, they have no chemistry. None of them felt like they cared to be there. None of them felt like they were friendly to each other. They all seemed like they hated each other. They just never shared any on-screen chemistry, and that's a shame because you had these great actors who are pretty decent choices for these roles, but it's just like what? And the movie is just very unfunny, and apparently Eli Roth tried to get his name taken off of this movie or something like that. I have no idea the story behind that, But yeah, Borderlands, it's unfortunate too because we had such a great height in video game adaptations with The Last of Us. Fallout was apparently very good. Still have not seen that. We had the Super Mario movie. We had the Sonic trilogy now. Like, we had so many good video game adaptations, and we thought Borderlands was going to be able to stay on the top and stay that and have that train still going. But unfortunately, it just fell to the bottom and it kind of killed the video game adaptation streak we had going. But hopefully, we could pick that back up soon and never have to deal with something like this ever again. Hopefully, we can leave something like this in the dust. So, yeah, Borderlands comes in at number two. But it's no surprise that my number one is Madam Web. I have talked about this movie, I feel enough. I have expressed my feelings on this movie. I have expressed my hatred that I seriously have for this movie. I have expressed of how much I think of a joke this movie has made the comic book genre. And yeah, I have felt like I have put more time talking about this movie of how much I hate it enough. It is generally one of the most boring comic book movies I've ever seen. It's probably the worst comic book movie I've ever seen. It again, I have put so much time into talking about my hatred for this movie, and I hate doing that. I said at the beginning because it's like I hate being that negative person. So yeah, no surprise, my number one, Madam Web. Thank you all so much for watching my ranking of the top 10 worst movies of 2024. Let me know which movies you thought were the worst of 2024 down in the comments below. And tomorrow, hopefully, I will have my top 10 best movies of 2024. So look out for that. Thank you all so much for watching again. If you like this video, like it. If you love it, subscribe to the notifications so you will get notified for all my latest videos. And of course, until my next video, I'll see you all next time.